A man stopped to help a woman who had suffered an accident on a deserted road. The young woman was badly injured. Miguel Reyes was 43 years old, and life had not been easy on him for a long time. He lived in San Antonio, Texas, in a small apartment on the east side of the city. The walls were thin, the carpet was old, and the heating barely worked in winter. But Miguel kept the place clean, because that was the kind of man he was. He had been raised to take care of what little he had. He worked construction during the week, waking up before 5 in the morning 6 days a week. His hands were rough and his back ached most nights, but he never complained. He had a reason to keep going, and that reason was his son, Marco. The boy was 11 years old, curious about everything, and had his mother's smile. Miguel carried a photo of Marco in his wallet and looked at it whenever the day felt too long. Marco lived with Miguel full-time. His mother had left when the boy was only 4, and Miguel had never looked back. He did not have time to be bitter. He had a child to raise, lunches to pack, and school pickups to make. Being a single father was the hardest job he had ever done, harder than any construction site, but it was also the one that made him most proud. That October, Miguel was behind on rent by $800. He had done the math over and over, and the numbers never came out right. He was running out of time. The eviction notice had arrived on a Thursday morning. Miguel found it folded under his apartment door when he left for work. He did not open it right away. He already knew what it said. He had been expecting it for 2 weeks. He tucked it into his jacket pocket and drove to the job site with a heavy feeling in his chest. All day he worked in silence, carrying boards up 3 flights of stairs, hauling concrete mix in the October heat. His co-workers talked and joked, but Miguel stayed focused. He was thinking about Marco. The boy did not know how bad things had gotten. Miguel had made sure that, at 11 years old, Marco still believed that his dad had everything under control. Miguel intended to keep it that way as long as possible. When the shift ended, Miguel drove home on the long back road that cut through the farmland south of the city. He took that road every night to avoid the highway traffic. It was dark and quiet, just flat land and fence posts on both sides. No streetlights, no houses for miles. Most people avoided it after dark, but Miguel knew every curb by heart. He was thinking about money, about Marco's school shoes that needed replacing, about the heating bill that was past due, when his headlights caught something on the road ahead. Something wrong. Metal glittering on the pavement. He slowed down and leaned forward to look. His heart jumped. There had been an accident. A motorcycle was wrapped around the guardrail, completely destroyed. Miguel pulled over without thinking twice. He grabbed his phone and dialed 911 before he even got out of the truck. His boots hit the ground and he ran toward the wreckage, scanning both sides of the road. The motorcycle was a complete loss. It had hit the guardrail hard, probably at high speed, and the metal was twisted beyond recognition. Pieces of the bike were spread across both lanes of the road. Miguel moved the flashlight on his phone back and forth through the dark until he saw her, a woman lying in the grass about 20 feet from the road. She was wearing full riding gear, the kind that costs real money, but it was torn in several places and there was blood on the sleeve. Her helmet was cracked but still on her head. Miguel crouched beside her, keeping his voice calm. "Don't move," he said. "Help is coming. Can you hear me?" She opened her eyes slowly. "Yes," she whispered. "I can't hear you. What's your name?" "Sofia," she said. "Sofia Herrera." She looked young, maybe in her mid-20s. Her face was pale and her breathing was shallow, but she was conscious and could move her fingers when he asked. Miguel had seen enough job site injuries to know that adrenaline could hide serious damage. He kept talking to her, asking simple questions, keeping her awake, while holding his jacket over her to block the wind. 20 minutes later, the ambulance arrived, then a state trooper. Sofia was alert enough to answer questions by then. Miguel stood back and watched, relieved but still worried. The paramedic looked at Miguel while they were loading Sofia onto the stretcher. "You riding with us?" she asked. "She's pretty shaken up. Might help to have a familiar face." Miguel looked at his truck, then back at Sofia. She was looking at him from the stretcher, grateful and scared at the same time. He thought about Marco at home with Mrs. Delgado from next door, who had agreed to watch him until 10. He thought about the early shift tomorrow and the money he could not afford to miss. Then he thought about how it would feel to just drive away. "Yeah," he said, "I'll go." The emergency room at County General was bright and loud and smelled like antiseptic. Miguel sat in a plastic chair in the waiting area, still in his dusty work clothes, and waited. He must have dozed off because the next thing he knew, a doctor was tapping his shoulder. "Mr. Reyes, you came in with Sofia Herrera?" "Yes." "How is she?" "She's going to be fine. Concussion, road rash, some deep bruising. No broken bones, no internal bleeding. She was very lucky." Miguel let out a long breath. "Can I see her?" The doctor paused. "Are you family?" "No. I just found her. Wanted to make sure she was okay. She's been asking about you." The doctor gave him the room number. Miguel walked down the hallway, surprised by the feeling in his chest. He had only known this woman for an hour, but something about the night felt important. He just did not know why yet. Room 314 was quiet. The lights were dim and the machines beeped softly. Sofia Herrera was sitting up in bed when Miguel walked in. Someone had cleaned her face, and her color was better. She looked young in the hospital gown, younger than she had on the road. She smiled when she saw him. "You stayed," she said. "Wanted to make sure you were all right. The doctor said I can go home tomorrow. My father is flying in from Dallas tonight." She paused. "I never got your name." Miguel Reyes." She extended her hand slowly, wincing a little from the bruising. "Sofia Herrera, and I owe you more than I can say." Miguel shook her hand. "You don't owe me anything. I'm just glad you're okay." They talked for a little while. Sofia asked about his work. Miguel told her about the construction job, about Marco, about the long drive home every night. He kept things light. He did not mention the eviction notice sitting in his truck. Sofia listened carefully, the way people listen when they are really paying attention. She was vague about her own work. She said she helped run her family's company. Miguel did not ask more. The expensive riding gear and the fact that her father was flying in from another city suggested money, but that was none of his business. When visiting hours ended, Miguel said goodnight and drove home. It was past midnight. He checked on Marco, who was asleep, and then sat on the edge of his own bed, still thinking about the woman in room 314 and the strange feeling that something had shifted. The next morning was a disaster from start. Miguel's alarm did not go off. His phone had died during the night, and he had forgotten to plug it in. He woke up at 6:45 with Marco shaking his arm. Dad, you're going to be late?" Miguel jumped out of bed, got Marco ready for school in 10 minutes flat, dropped him off, and drove to the job site with one hand on the wheel and one eye on the clock. He was 20 minutes late. His foreman, a stocky man named Ray, was standing by the entrance with his arms crossed. "Third time this month, Reyes." "I know. My phone died. It won't happen again." "Make sure it doesn't. We got a deadline." Miguel worked twice as hard to make up for lost time, hauling material and running between floors until his back burned. By the end of the shift, his hands were raw and his legs felt like concrete. The drive home was long and quiet. He was so tired and so deep in thought about rent and hours and money that he almost missed the problem when he got home. He put his key in the apartment door and turned it. Nothing. He tried again. The key did not fit. Miguel stepped back and looked at the door. Same apartment. Same key ring. He had carried these keys for 2 years. He walked to the parking lot to clear his head, and that is when he noticed the second problem. His truck was gone. He stood in the empty parking lot and felt the ground shift under him. Miguel walked back to the apartment and knocked on his own door. No answer. He pressed his face to the window and cupped his hands to block the glare. The apartment was empty, not just dark. Empty. His furniture was gone. His television, his kitchen table, Marco's drawings taped to the wall. All of it. The cold feeling in his stomach turned into something worse. He stepped back from the window and sat on the porch steps, trying to stay calm. Marco was still at Mrs. Delgado's after school. He had a few hours before he had to have an answer for the boy. "Excuse me, are you Miguel Reyes?" He turned around. A woman in a business suit was standing behind him, mid-40s, carrying a briefcase, looking completely out of place in the worn-down complex. Professional, calm, and watching him carefully. "Yes, that's me. My name is Patricia Santos. I work for Hartman Property Management. I've been trying to reach you all day." Miguel's stomach dropped. "Did you evict me? Is that why I can't get in?" Patricia held up one hand and smiled. "Mr. Reyes, I think there's been some confusion. Could we talk for a moment? Just tell me straight. Your lease has been bought out," she said. "All your belongings have been moved to your new residence, and I have the keys right here." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a set of keys attached to a leather keychain. She held them out to him. "Congratulations, Mr. Reyes. You are now a homeowner." Miguel stared at the keys like they were something that could bite him. His brain refused to process what she had just said. Homeowner. The word did not belong in a sentence about his life. He had been counting coins for the laundry machine 2 days ago. "There has to be a mistake," he said. "No mistake. Someone purchased a home for you outright. No mortgage. No payments. The deed is in your name." "That's impossible. I don't know anyone with that kind of money." Patricia pulled a tablet from her briefcase. Miguel Reyes, 43 years old. Single father. One son, Marco, age 11. Works construction for Rivera Brothers. Drives a 2016 Ford pickup. "Were you at County General Hospital last night, visiting a patient named Sofia Herrera?" Miguel felt the air leave his lungs. He sat down on the porch steps again. "How do you know about that?" "Because Ms. Herrera's family hired us to find you. You helped her after a motorcycle accident and left before anyone could thank you properly. Her father was very determined to locate you. He bought me a house because I called an ambulance." Patricia smiled. "Mr. Reyes, do you know who Sofia Herrera is?" He thought for a moment. She said she worked for her family's company. Her family's company is Herrera Holdings. They are one of the largest real estate development firms in the state of Texas. Her father, Roberto Herrera, owns more property than almost anyone between San Antonio and Dallas. The porch step felt like it was made of water. Miguel put both hands on his knees to steady himself. Patricia handed Miguel the keys and a thick manila envelope. The address is inside, along with the deed and all the paperwork. "Your truck is in the driveway." Mr. Herrera noticed it needed some work, so he had his mechanics go over it completely. Miguel opened the envelope with shaking hands. The address was in Alamo Heights, a neighborhood he had driven through but never imagined living in. Houses there did not start below $400,000. He read the address 3 times to make sure his eyes were not playing tricks on him. "This can't be real," he said quietly. "I assure you it is very real." Patricia reached back into her briefcase. "Mr. Herrera also wanted to give you this." She handed him a business card. He read it slowly. "Assistant Project Manager, Herrera Holdings, San Antonio Division. If you're ever interested in a career change," Patricia said, "Mr. Herrera would like to speak with you directly." Miguel looked at the card, then at the keys, then at the envelope in his lap. His whole life had been one long lesson in things not working out. And now a woman in a suit was standing in his parking lot telling him that a billionaire had bought him a house and offered him a job because he had stayed at a hospital until midnight. He thought about Marco asleep in Mrs. Delgado's apartment, about the school shoes that needed replacing, about the eviction notice still crumpled in his truck. Except the truck was not in this parking lot anymore. It was somewhere better. "Where's the house?" he asked. 15 minutes later, Miguel was parked in front of a house that the paperwork said was his. He sat in his truck, which now ran like a brand new vehicle, and looked at it for a long time before getting out. It was not a mansion, but it was the nicest place he had ever stood in front of. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a real garage, a front lawn with a tree in the center that had been there for a very long time. He walked up the path slowly, like someone who was not sure he was allowed to be there. He put the key in the lock, and it turned smoothly. The door swung open into a hallway that smelled like fresh paint and clean wood. The movers had arranged his furniture inside, and it looked almost funny. His old couch and his scratched coffee table were sitting in rooms built for nicer things. But it was his stuff. Marco's drawings from the refrigerator had been carefully placed on the kitchen counter, not lost, not thrown away. On that same counter, there was a note in clean handwriting. Miguel, thank you for being there when I needed someone most. You stayed when you had every reason to leave. You asked for nothing in return. My father always taught me that real kindness must be answered. I hope you and your son are very happy here. Sofia. Miguel read it twice. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. He walked to the back door, opened it, and stepped out into the yard. He stood there in the dark, breathing the cool October air, not quite believing any of it. His phone rang while he was still standing in the backyard. Unknown number. He almost did not answer. Too much had already happened in one day, but something made him pick up. Hello, Miguel. This is Roberto Herrera. I believe you met my daughter Sofia last night. The voice was warm and deep, the kind of voice that comes from years of being listened to. Miguel straightened up without thinking about it. Mr. Herrera, I don't know what to say. This is too much. I can't accept all of this. Miguel, may I call you Miguel? Yes, sir. I want you to understand something. I have been in business for 35 years. I have met thousands of people. Good people, bad people, people who say one thing and do another. When Sofia told me what you did, how you stayed with her all night, how you almost lost a day's pay to make sure a stranger was safe, I knew immediately what kind of man you are. Mr. Herrera, I just did what any person would do. Roberto Herrera paused. Miguel, my daughter was lying on that road for nearly 30 minutes before you arrived. 3 other cars drove past her. The state trooper confirmed it using traffic cameras. You were not just any person who would stop. You were the only person who did. Miguel leaned against the fence and looked up at the sky. The stars were out. He had not noticed them in a long time. I still think the house is too much, he said quietly. It is done, Roberto said, but I do have one request. I want you to consider coming to work for me, Roberto said. I need a project manager for a new development starting next month. Someone who understands construction from the ground up. Someone who can work with regular people. Someone who can be trusted to do the right thing when nobody is watching. Miguel walked slowly around his new backyard as he listened. The grass was soft under his boots. There was a small garden area near the back fence. Overgrown, but full of potential. He had always wanted a garden. Never had the space. What would the job involve, he asked. Overseeing construction crews. Making sure projects stay on schedule and on budget. Being my representative on job sites. You would report directly to me. I don't have management experience. You made a decision in 2 seconds to help a stranger when you had every reason to keep driving. You stayed for hours with nothing to gain. That tells me more about your character than any resume could. Roberto paused. The salary is 3 times what you are making now. Health insurance for you and your son. A company vehicle. Miguel stopped walking. 3 times his current salary. He thought about Marco's school shoes, about the heating bill, about the look on the boy's face every morning when Miguel packed his lunch and pretended everything was fine. Can I think about it until tomorrow? Miguel asked. Of course, Roberto said. Take all the time you need. But, Miguel, one more thing. My daughter would like to meet you properly when she is feeling better. She has something she wants to say to you in person. Miguel spent the first night in the new house, sleeping on his old mattress, in the biggest bedroom he had ever had. He set Marco's drawings on the dresser and left the door open so he could see the hallway. He lay there in the dark for a long time, not sleeping, just thinking. In the morning, he drove to Mrs. Delgado's to pick up Marco. The boy came to the door with his backpack on and his shoes untied. He looked at the truck, then at his father. Dad, the truck sounds different. They fixed it up. It runs better now. Marco climbed in and buckled his belt. Where are we going? This isn't the way to school. I know. I want to show you something first. Miguel turned toward Alamo Heights. When they pulled up in front of the house, Marco pressed his face to the window. Whose house is that? Ours. The boy looked at him slowly. What do you mean ours? I mean it belongs to us. We live here now. Marco stared at the house for a long time. Then he looked at his father with 11-year-old eyes that were trying to figure out if this was real or a test or some kind of dream. For real? For real? Marco got out of the truck and walked up the front door like he was walking on thin ice, not sure it would hold. Miguel followed him and unlocked the door. The boy stepped inside, looked around the empty hallway, and then turned back to his father with the widest smile Miguel had seen in years. "We have a yard, Dad." Marco ran through every room twice. He claimed the biggest bedroom without asking, dropped his backpack on the floor, and announced that this would be his room forever. Miguel did not argue. Watching the boys spin around in a room that was bigger than their old living room was worth every hard year he had lived through to get to this moment. Later that morning, after dropping Marco at school, Miguel drove back to the house and sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and Roberto Herrera's business card. He turned it over in his fingers several times. He had worked construction since he was 19 years old. He knew job sites, he knew crews, he knew how long things really took versus how long managers said they would take. He knew the difference between materials that would last and materials that were cheap. He had spent over 20 years watching project managers make decisions from trailers while the real work happened around them. He always thought he could do it better. Now someone was offering him the chance to find out. He picked up his phone and called the number on the card. Roberto answered on the second ring. "I'd like to take the job," Miguel said. "I'm very glad," Roberto said. "Can you come to the office Thursday to meet the team?" "Yes, sir." "And Miguel, Sofia is being discharged today. She would like to see you. She asked me to invite you to dinner at the house this weekend, if you and your son are free." Miguel paused. Dinner at the Herrera house. His son at the table with a family like that. He looked at Marco's drawings on the counter. "We like that," he said. The Herrera house was on the north side of San Antonio, in a neighborhood where the trees were old and the driveways were long. Miguel drove to the gate on Saturday evening with Marco in the passenger seat, wearing the boy's cleanest shirt and his own only good jacket. The house was large but not cold. Lights were on in every window, and Miguel could smell food from the driveway. Sofia met them at the door. She was moving carefully, still bruised, but she smiled when she saw them and crouched down a little to say hello to Marco. "You must be the famous Marco," she said. The boy looked at his father, uncertain. "I'm not that famous." Sofia laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere honest. "Your dad told me you're in 6th grade. My nephew is in 6th grade too. He's here tonight." That was enough. Marco relaxed completely and followed Sofia inside like he had been there before. Roberto Herrera was in the kitchen, which surprised Miguel. He had expected a large man in a suit giving orders. Instead, he found a 62-year-old man with flour on his apron, stirring something on the stove and arguing softly with the cook about the right amount of cumin. He turned when Miguel walked in and extended a hand. His grip was firm and warm. "Miguel, thank you for coming. You must be hungry." The dinner lasted 3 hours. Marco and Roberto's grandson disappeared into the backyard with a football. The adults talked around a long table full of food, and Miguel felt, for the first time in years, completely at ease. After dinner, while Marco and the other boy were still in the backyard and Roberto had stepped away to take a call, Miguel and Sofia sat on the back porch with glasses of sweet tea. The night was cool, and the yard was lit by string lights strung between the trees. Sofia looked at her hand for a moment before she spoke. "I want to apologize," she said. Miguel looked at her, surprised. "For what?" "For putting my family in a position where they felt they had to do all of this. The house, the truck, the job offer. I know it must feel overwhelming, and I know that was not your intention when you stopped to help me." "No," Miguel said simply. "It wasn't." "Then why did you stay?" "At the hospital. You had a son at home. You had work in the morning. You didn't know me." Miguel looked out at the yard where Marco was laughing at something. "Because you were scared," he said. "And I know what it feels like to be scared and alone. I didn't want you to feel that way." Sofia was quiet for a moment. "My mother passed away 4 years ago," she said. "Car accident. My father found her. He stayed with her until the end. When he heard what you did, he said you reminded him of himself when he was young." Miguel did not know what to say to that. He just nodded slowly. "I wanted to tell you," Sofia continued, "that none of this is charity. It is gratitude. There is a difference." Miguel looked at her. I'm starting to understand that, he said. The following Thursday, Miguel walked into Herrera Holdings' offices for his first day. The building was 12 stories tall, and the lobby had real marble floors. He had driven past this building 100 times without ever imagining he would work inside it. Patricia Santos, the same woman who had handed him the house keys, met him at the reception desk and walked him to the 11th floor. The project management team had 8 people. They were professional, organized, and clearly busy. Miguel shook hands with each one and tried to remember names. His office was not large, but it had a window. He stood at that window for a moment before sitting down, looking out over the city he had driven through for 20 years without ever seeing from above. The work was different from anything he had done before, but not completely unfamiliar. His first assignment was overseeing a residential development on the south side of the city. 42 affordable housing units for working families. The kind of neighborhood he had grown up in, the kind of families he knew. He spent his first week at the job site every day, walking the property, talking to crews, understanding what was already there and what needed to change. The workers watched him carefully at first, the way they always watch a new manager. But when they saw that he knew which end of the nail gun to point away from himself, the tension eased. On Friday afternoon, Roberto called him into his office. How was the first week? Good, Miguel said. Hard, but good. Roberto nodded. That is exactly the right answer. Marco adapted to the new house faster than Miguel expected. Within 2 weeks, the boy had turned his room into a proper headquarters, with his drawings on the walls and his books stacked on a real bookshelf instead of a plastic crate. He had made a friend 2 streets over, a boy named Diego who went to school, and the two of them spent afternoons in the yard kicking a soccer ball around. Miguel watched Marco from the kitchen window sometimes after work, just stood there with a glass of water and watched the boy laugh and run, and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Settled, like the ground under his feet was actually solid. Sofia texted him occasionally, checking in, asking how the job was going, sending Marco a funny video she thought an 11-year-old would like. Marco thought she was the coolest adult he had ever met, which he told his father with complete seriousness. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after the dinner at her family's house, Sofia called instead of texting. "I'm going back to riding," she said. "Just wanted you to know. Main roads only. Full gear." "Good," Miguel said. "Be careful." "I will." A pause. "Miguel, I have a question and you don't have the answer." "Go ahead. Are you happy? Like, actually happy? I know the house and the job are a lot, but I want to know if you're okay." Miguel looked out the window at Marco in the yard. "Yeah," he said, and meant it. "I think I actually am." There was a warmth in her voice when she answered. "I'm glad." 2 months after the accident, Sofia stopped by the job site on a Tuesday afternoon. She rode up on a new motorcycle, parked it properly, and walked the site with Miguel for an hour, asking smart questions and listening carefully to the answers. The workers were curious about her, but she did not make a show of being the boss's daughter. She asked the same questions she would have asked anyone. Afterward, they sat on the tailgate of his truck and ate tacos from the truck that came by the site at noon. It was simple and it felt easy, the way things feel when you stop trying to perform for each other. "You know the crew likes you," Sofia said. "They like that I know what I'm talking about." Miguel said, "That's different." "Is it?" He thought about it. "Maybe not." She looked at the development taking shape around them, the frame of the first building already standing. "My father said you're the best hire he's made in 10 years. He told me the same thing about you." Sofia laughed. "He's biased." "Probably, but he's also right." She looked at him sideways. He looked away at the building frame. There was something between them that had been building quietly, the way buildings build, one honest thing at a time. Neither of them named it that afternoon, but it was there, clear as a steel frame against the blue Texas sky. When she left, she waved from the motorcycle and drove carefully onto the main road, just like she had promised. Miguel watched until she was out of sight, then went back to work with something warm sitting in his chest. It was Marco who said it first, the way children often say the thing adults are dancing around. He and Miguel were having dinner on a Friday night. Enchiladas from scratch, one of the only real meals Miguel knew how to cook, when Marco looked up from his plate with the expression he got when he was about to say something important. "Dad, do you like Sofia?" Miguel set his fork down slowly. "She's a good person." "That's not what I asked." Miguel looked at his son, 11 years old, and already reading rooms like an adult. "What made you ask that?" Marco shrugged. "You smile different when she calls. Like how Abuela smiles when Abuelo walks in the room." Miguel was quiet for a moment. His parents had been married for 41 years. He had grown up watching what real care looked like between two people. It was not loud or dramatic. It was steady. It showed up in small things. "I don't know yet," Miguel said honestly. "We're still getting to know each other." Marco considered this carefully. "She's nice to me," he said. "Not fake nice. Real nice." "I know. And she knows a lot about motorcycles." "She does." Marco went back to his food. "Okay, just saying." He ate another bite. "Also, she laughed at my joke about the rooster. Most adults don't actually laugh. They just pretend." Miguel smiled at his plate. He could not argue with any of that. He picked up his fork and finished his dinner, thinking about a woman on a new motorcycle who laughed at a child's joke like she meant it. 3 months after the accident, Addictive Stories received a message from a viewer in Houston who said the kind of story they were looking for was exactly the kind of life Miguel Reyes was living. But Miguel did not know that yet. He was too busy managing 42 housing units and learning the names of every worker on his site. He had settled into the job the way he had always settled into hard work, by showing up every day and paying attention. He made mistakes. He asked questions he was not sure a project manager was supposed to ask. He called Roberto directly when he was uncertain about something instead of guessing and getting it wrong. Roberto always picked up, and he always answered straight. Sofia came by the site twice a week now. It had started as professional visits, checking on the development, bringing updates from her father, but it had shifted without either of them announcing it. She brought coffee. She asked about Marco. She stayed longer than the reports required. One afternoon, she helped Miguel sort through a discrepancy in the materials order, sitting across from him at a fold-out table with spreadsheets between them, arguing about square footage the way you argue about something when you're both trying to get it right. When they finally found the error, they both reached for the same document at the same time. Their hands touched. They both went still for a second. "Found it," Miguel said, pulling his hand back. "Found it." Sofia agreed, looking at the paper. Neither of them said anything else about it, but both of them were thinking about it for the rest of the afternoon. Roberto noticed. He did not say anything directly, because he was not that kind of father, but he started scheduling fewer meetings during the afternoon hours when Sofia visited the development site. He started inviting Miguel to family dinners more regularly. He asked Marco, during one such dinner, what his father's favorite food was, and wrote down the answer. The following Saturday, Roberto hosted a small gathering at his home. A few people from the office, Sofia's older brother Andres and his wife, Marco and his friend Diego, and Miguel. The food included Miguel's favorite dish, a detail that no one acknowledged directly, but that Miguel noticed immediately. After dinner, Roberto pulled Miguel aside to look at some project drawings in his study, but the drawings were already sorted and required no discussion. Roberto sat down and looked at him plainly. "How are you doing, Miguel?" "Not the project. You personally." "I'm doing well, sir. Better than I've been in years." Roberto nodded slowly. "My daughter is 31 years old. She has worked in this company since she was 24. She has dated very few people, and none of them seriously. She is careful about who she trusts." Miguel was quiet. "She trusts you," Roberto said. "Not because of what you did that night. Because of who you have been every day since then." Miguel looked at the drawings on the desk. "I have a son," he said. "My life is complicated." "Everyone's life is complicated," Roberto said. "The question is whether you are worth the complication." He paused. "I believe you are, but the decision is yours." Miguel thought about what Roberto said for 2 full weeks before he did anything about it. He was not the kind of man who moved without thinking. He had learned early that decisions made fast were often decisions regretted slow. He talked to Marco one evening while they were washing dishes together. He did not frame it as anything serious. just mentioned that he had been spending time with Sofia and wanted to know if Marco had any feelings about it. Marco dried a bowl without looking up. "Are you asking me if it's okay?" "I'm asking what you think." Marco set the bowl down and turned around to lean against the counter. He crossed his arms the way Miguel sometimes crossed his arms, a habit the boy had picked up without knowing it. "I think," Marco said carefully, "that you've been alone for a long time. And I think Sofia is a good person. And I think I'm old enough to understand that you needing someone doesn't mean you love me less." Miguel looked at his son for a long moment. "When did you get this smart?" "I've always been this smart," Marco said. "You just don't ask me enough questions." Miguel laughed. It was a full laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere that has been tight for a long time. Marco grinned back at him and picked up another bowl to dry. That evening, after Marco was in bed, Miguel sat at the kitchen table and sent Sofia a message. Simple and direct, because he had never been good at complicated. "Would you like to have dinner with me? Just us. Not the job site, not family dinner. Just dinner." He hit send before he could second-guess himself. She answered in 4 minutes. "Yes. Saturday?" He smiled at the screen. Saturday. They went to a small restaurant in the Pearl District, the kind of place with candles on the table and a menu that changed every week. Not too formal, not too casual. Miguel wore the good jacket and shined his boots. Sofia wore a dress that was simple and blue and somehow exactly right. They talked for 3 hours without running out of things to say. About their families, about growing up in San Antonio, about what it felt like to lose a parent. Sofia had lost her mother, and Miguel had lost a woman he thought would be his partner. Different kinds of loss, but they recognized something familiar in each other. She told him things she did not tell most people, about the pressure of the family name, about feeling like she had to prove herself before anyone would take her seriously. He told her things he had not said out loud in years, about the fear of raising Marco wrong, about lying awake at 3 a.m. adding numbers that never worked out. When the restaurant closed around them, they walked along the river for a while. The lights reflected off the water, and the air was cold enough that their breath fogged a little. "I've never been good at this part," Sofia said. "What part?" "The beginning." She looked at the water. "I'm better when I know what something is." "Then let's figure out what it is," Miguel said. She looked at him. He looked back. The river moved quietly below them, and the city was soft around them, and neither of them looked away. The months that followed were the kind Miguel had stopped believing were possible for him. He and Sofia were careful with each other, not rushed, not performing. They had dinner twice a week and texted in the mornings and took things at the pace that felt honest instead of the pace that looked impressive. Marco accepted her the way children accept people who are genuinely kind. Not overnight, not with a big dramatic moment. Just slowly, the way trust actually builds. By December, Marco was texting Sofia directly about homework he did not want to ask his dad about. Sofia always answered and always pointed him back to Miguel for the final word. At work, they kept things professional. Roberto had made it clear that the business ran on trust, and they both understood what that meant. On the job site, Sofia was the boss's daughter and Miguel was the project manager, and they acted accordingly. After hours was different. The residential development finished in February, 2 weeks ahead of schedule. Roberto held a small celebration at the office. He shook Miguel's hand in front of the whole team and said simply, "Well done." Those 2 words from that man felt like more than any speech. That evening, Sofia brought a bottle of champagne to the new house. The 3 of them, her and Miguel and Marco, sat at the kitchen table and drank sparkling cider from Marco and champagne for the adults and ate pizza from a box and talked about nothing in particular. It was not dramatic. It was not like the movies. It was just real and warm and good. Miguel thought that this was what happy actually looked like. Spring arrived and the garden Miguel had always wanted became a real project. The back corner of the yard that had been overgrown was now turned and planted. Tomatoes, peppers, herbs along the fence. Marco helped on weekends, complaining about the dirt under his fingernails, but coming back every Saturday anyway. Sofia came over one Sunday morning and found them both in the garden, Miguel on his knees, pulling weeds, and Marco standing over him giving unnecessary directions. She stood at the back door, watching for a moment before they noticed her. "You should have the tomatoes closer to the fence," she said. Marco pointed at his father. "That's what I said." Miguel did not look up from the weeding. "You both know nothing about tomatoes." Sofia laughed and walked down to help, pulling weeds from the other end of the row. The three of them worked in the morning light without saying much, comfortable enough now that silence between them did not require filling. Roberto came by that afternoon, unannounced but not unexpected. He brought empanadas from the bakery 3 blocks away, the kind with sweet potato filling that Marco declared were the best thing he had ever eaten. The 4 of them ate at the picnic table Miguel had put together 2 weekends ago, and Roberto told stories about building his first development 30 years ago, the mistakes he made, and what they cost him and what they taught him. Marco listened with his chin on his hand, completely absorbed. Miguel watched his son absorbing a life lesson from a man who had built something real and felt profoundly grateful for the night he had stopped on a dark road. 1 year after the accident, Roberto Herrera held a small gathering at the office. Not a party, more of a pause. He gathered the project management team and stood at the front of the room and talked about the past year, the projects completed, the families housed, the work done right. Then he looked at Miguel directly. "1 year ago, a man driving home from a 12-hour shift stopped to help my daughter on a dark road. He had no reason to stop and every reason to keep going. He stayed because it was right, not because it was convenient. That is the only kind of person I want building this company." He raised a glass of champagne. Everyone followed. Marco, who had been allowed to attend because Roberto had insisted, raised his glass of juice with the dignity of someone 3 times his age. After, when the room was clearing out, Sofia found Miguel by the window. They stood side by side looking out at the city. "How does it feel?" she asked. Miguel thought about the eviction notice, about the cold parking lot, about the first night in the house with his furniture that did not fit the rooms, about a girl on a stretcher looking at him with scared eyes, about Marco in the garden giving bad advice about tomatoes, about dinner tables and Sunday mornings, and the way Sofia's voice sounded when she said his name. "It feels like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," he said. She reached over and took his hand. He did not let go. A few weeks after the 1-year gathering, Miguel got a phone call from an unknown number on a Tuesday evening. Marco was doing homework at the table. Miguel stepped into the hallway to answer. "Hello, is this Miguel Reyes?" The man who stopped to help a motorcycle accident last year. Miguel leaned against the wall. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Carmen Vega. My brother was in a car accident in El Paso 6 months ago. A construction worker was the first one to stop. He stayed until the ambulance came, and then left before my brother could get his name. When my brother told me the story, he mentioned yours. Said a friend told him what you did. He's been looking for ways to pay it forward ever since." Miguel was quiet for a moment. "Is your brother okay?" "He's fine. Back to work now. But he's been volunteering on weekends at the fire station near his house. Says he wants to be the kind of person who stops." A pause. "I just want to say thank you. Not just for what you did that night, but for what it started." After he hung up, Miguel stood in the hallway for a long time. Then he walked back to the table and sat down across from Marco. "Who was that?" Marco asked without looking up from his homework. "Someone saying thank you." Marco looked up. "For what?" Miguel thought about the right way to answer. "For stopping," he said finally. Marco nodded like that made complete sense and went back to his homework. Miguel watched him write and thought about how one decision can travel farther than you ever see. On a Saturday morning in May, Miguel woke up before anyone else in the house. Sofia had started staying over on weekends, in the guest room with the door properly closed and Marco fully aware and unbothered. The house had adjusted to 3 people in it the way houses do when the people inside are right for each other. Miguel made coffee and took it to the back porch. The garden was doing well. The tomato plants were knee-high and the peppers were beginning to set fruit. He sat in the chair he had placed near the door and listened to the birds and the quiet and thought about his father, who had worked construction his entire life and died before seeing Miguel find his footing. He wished he could call him, tell him about the house and the garden, and the job and Sofia and Marco getting taller every week. Tell him that the hard years had not been wasted, that they had built something, even when it did not feel like it. That kindness had come back around in ways neither of them could have imagined. Sofia came out 40 minutes later with her own coffee and sat in the other chair. She did not say anything right away. She looked at the garden. He looked at the garden. The morning sat between them, comfortable and unhurried. Marco asked me something last night, she said finally. What? He asked if I was going to be around for a long time. Miguel looked at her. What did you say? She looked back at him steadily. I said that was up to his dad. Miguel set down his coffee. He took a breath. Then yes, he said, you are. By summer, the 42 housing units were fully occupied. Miguel drove past the development on a Friday afternoon. Just to look. Families were already settled. He could see children in the small yards, laundry drying on lines, a man washing a car in the driveway of Unit 12. Real lives beginning in buildings that had not existed a year ago. He had overseen every part of it, not from a trailer with a clipboard, but on the ground, walking the site, knowing the names of the men who swung the hammers. He had made mistakes and corrected them and learned from them. Roberto had not protected him from the hard parts. He had let him figure them out, which was the better lesson. Roberto gave him a second project that summer, a commercial building in Southtown, bigger and more complicated, with a tighter timeline and a higher budget. Miguel accepted it without hesitation. Sofia took on the community outreach side of the residential project, working with the families who had moved in to make sure the transition was smooth. She was good at it in a way that had nothing to do with her last name. She listened. She followed up. She fixed things quietly instead of announcing that she had fixed them. Marco started 7th grade in September with Diego still next door and new confidence in his voice. He had grown 2 inches over the summer and had opinions about everything. Miguel took him to his first professional soccer game in October, and they stood in the standing section and yelled themselves hoarse. On the drive home, Marco fell asleep in the passenger seat. Miguel drove through the quiet streets of their city and felt nothing but grateful. On the night of October 14th, exactly 1 year and 1 day after the accident, Miguel drove home from the job site on the old back road out of habit. He had not planned to. His hands just knew the route. It was a cool night, the same kind of October night, the same flat land and fence posts on both sides, the same dark sky. He slowed when he passed the guardrail. Someone had placed a small bunch of wildflowers there, tied with a yellow ribbon. He did not know who. Maybe someone else who remembered that night. He stopped the truck and sat with the engine running for a moment, looking at the flowers in his headlights. He thought about the man he had been driving home that night, exhausted, behind on rent, running on empty, carrying an eviction notice in the sun, and a stubbornness that would not let him quit. That man had not stopped because he was brave or because he expected anything in return. He had stopped because someone needed help, and he was there. That was the whole story. And from that one moment, everything else had grown. He pulled back onto the road and drove home. The lights were on in the house. Sofia's car was in the driveway. Marco's bike was leaning against the porch. The garden was waiting. His life was waiting, solid and real in his. Addictive Stories is built on moments like this one. Not the extraordinary moments, but the ordinary ones where someone makes a quiet choice to do the right thing, and everything changes because of it. Miguel Reyes drove through his gate and parked his truck and went inside to the people who were waiting for him. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.